Recording. All right. So what do we have left today and then 2 more weeks? I've already told you the last week of class is for time for you to work on the project or labs you don't have done. And so we have this meeting and 2 more of next week. I owe you 2 things in terms of databases. We have the main database interactions are select. We've been doing lots of selecting. Select is just a basic query, get information out of the database. And we have tables, entities with relationships, and there's a one-to-many relationship and a many-to-many relationship. And we have queried and worked with the relationships and done a more explicit join query, as well as work the relationships and work with both types of relationship. So querying we've covered, and we you can always make the answers look nicer and so on. But we've done plenty of select. We've done a lot of querying of our database. We have insert. I showed you a simple insert where the table had no foreign keys. I've shown you an insert where there was 1 foreign key. And today I'm going to show you sort of inserting into a bridge table, so where sort of it's all foreign keys. So today I will finish off the sort of insert action. We've done a simple delete. We have not done a more complex delete, so that might be something I do next week. What do we do if we're deleting, say, the painter? What do we do with all that painter's paintings? So we've avoided that issue just by not deleting a painter, but that's an issue that we have not dealt with, that we may. I haven't gotten to it in previous versions of this class. I'm a little bit ahead. So that is something that we have not covered that we might cover. And then the thing that I need to cover that we haven't even touched on is update. You have some records. So we know how to introduce new records. We know how to take out old records. We know how to query the records, but we also need to know how to update the records, to change a value in an existing record, and we have not done that. So that will definitely be in some version next week. We will have an update. I may try to show you a delete with a cascade. We'll see. I'm also trying to back off a little bit and make things easy. There was no homework this week. Today's lab has nothing to do, today's topic is many-to-many insert. But the lab has nothing to do with that. The lab is actually half of my test from a year ago, and the other half of my test from a year ago was homework 10. So you'll have a good idea if you look at between homework 10 and this, what I'm calling the city lab, you will have my test from a year ago. I'm going to rearrange things, and the homework part was SQLAlchemy and no Flask, so just creating a database. And then in the city lab, I give you the definition of the database and a bunch of routes and some forms, and I have you add other routes and other forms and so on. So In one, I give you nothing and you create from scratch, and the other, I give you a lot and you have to add to it. Both things you'll need to know how to do. And you never have to create completely from scratch. You can always use your labs and homeworks and so on when you're taking my tests. Okay. So again, so we have a test in the finals week, test 3 in the finals week. You want to know what that test is going to be like, do homework 10 and lab 24. That'll give you a good sense. I will definitely have a different database definition for you to do, but it won't be very different. Database definitions are what? There's a table, there's a one-to-many relationship, there's a many-to-many relationship. If you know that, if you know how to make a table, how to make a foreign key, a primary key, how to make this bridge table, all I'm going to do is like rearrange it, and change the scenario. But that part is what it is. The adding the routes part, it depends what routes I have you add. So I can have you add a table or a data table or an insert or a delete or an API, all sorts of different types of routes, and some of them have forms and some of them don't have forms. So I can have, that's what the other half of the test will be like. And today's lab is again, half of the test from a year ago. All right. So enough blathering about that. Let's start looking at the example. So in the, well, I'll get these files in place. So I went back to my, as we did the other day, we were playing with join queries, and I wanted to show you a many-to-many join. So I went back to Beatles. So I'm also going back to Beatles here because I want to do that many-to-many relationship, but with an insert. 341, SQL2, virtual environment, paste. Okay, let me close that, open it. I still have 1 or 2 people not realizing they should open a folder instead of a file. Open a folder, open the virtual environment. Okay. And now, what do I have? I have the Beatles definition. There is my right table, which is a connection between the song and the artist, because that's a many-to-many relationship. John Lennon and Paul McCartney, 2 artists, wrote many songs. So, and a song is written by many artists. At least more than, many means more than one, and it doesn't mean always, but sometimes. So a song can be written by more than one person, and a person can write more than one song. So that was a many-to-many relationship. And that's realized by this bridge table or connection table, and I call it the right table, and that's just my name because it's these people wrote songs. I could have called it song table, I could have called it song right table, I could have called it bridge table. That's just the name. I have an album. I had a string primary key because I already had data which had some primary keys in it. And I had an album title. There is a place for an image. I didn't do anything with said images, but I had that data in my file, and it had a relationship to song. The song is connected to a table called song. It has an auto increment primary key. It has a song title. It's connected to an album. So this was a one-to-many relationship. A song is on one album. We're talking about the album it debuts on, and we're not doing any greatest hit albums. And so a song is on one album, and album contains many songs. So that was a one-to-many relationship realized by a foreign key in the table with the one. So a song is on one album. So that indicates to me that that's where the foreign key goes. If you look at homework 10, I'm not going to say, set this field up as the foreign key. I'm not that nice. I'm going to say, here are the relationships. Here's the counting of the relationships. Then you have to know, given the counting of the relationships, who's the foreign key. So it's not just all about, do I know Python SQLAlchemy syntax? It's also going to be, do I know a little bit about a database? Who should be the foreign key? If you choose the wrong foreign key, I'll give you some credit for knowing the right syntax, but you're not going to get full credit if you make the wrong thing the foreign key. Okay, and then there was a relationship from song to artist, and that was a many-to-many, and realized through the bridge table. The artist, again, the primary key, auto increment, first name, last name, and a relationship to song through the right table. So that is my definition. We saw that before. We're loading. We saw that before. Oh, I did make a change that I should have pointed out. Once I start doing some Flask with my database, then I add in this check same thread false, so then I don't get security messages about different queries to the database in different threads. So we had this definition of the Beatles before, but we didn't do any interfacing using Flask before, so there was no issue of threads before. Now that I'm bringing Flask in, not much, but some Flask in, the potential arises for there to be a thread problem. So I brought this little bit in when I'm defining the table. That's one of those things that's hard to find. If you forget it, things won't work. So try to remember it, make yourself a big note. Don't forget to do that. And also, so on the homework thing, homework 10, which is all pure SQLAlchemy, you don't need it because it's all pure SQLAlchemy. On the test, I tend to give you, if you see, we'll look at the lab at the end and see what I give you. I usually already give you a define. So on the test, it's not going to be too much of a problem because in one part of the test, you don't need it. And in the other part of the test, I'm going to give it to you. So you're probably in the clear. But for your labs and for your project, this is an important thing to remember. Okay. So then in the load, I had some Beatles files. So I read some files. They were .txt, but they were comma separated. I did some hard coding. That's one thing to realize about the test, that like the homework 10 part of the practice test, is that if I don't say it has to be read from a file, it doesn't have to be read from a file. So you could do some just simple hard coding to get some data. I have people who will spend 20 minutes making a JSON file and making mistakes in their JSON file when they never had to have a JSON file. So if the only way you know how to do it is a JSON file, then okay, proceed with your JSON file. But, you know, and then here is, again, some more hard coding into the right table. And that's what we were doing today. I want to do more of this, more writing to the right table, which is my bridge table or connection table. But I want the user to help me out. So I'm writing a many-to-many insert. That's our goal. We had the queries. That was the game we were playing earlier with the joins. And now I've added routes and I've added a form. Okay. So let's look at the form. I have an artist ID, which is a select, which is a drop down. And I have a song ID, which is a drop, which is a select field, which is a drop down. And I have the submit, which is a submit button. So remember when we did a one-to-many, when I was adding a painting and I wanted to say this painting was by this painter, then I had a drop down for the painters because that is a foreign key and it must relate to the other table. So I made the possibilities, the artists, and put them into the drop-down list. So the user can't make up some artist that doesn't exist. So we are maintaining a certain kind of integrity in our database. We're forcing our user to maintain our database integrity. That the foreign key that we're putting into a table has to have a corresponding value in that table it's making the relationship to. Okay, now I'm doing a many-to-many. This is my many-to-many relationship. My right table, that bridge table, the connection table. This is the song to artist relationship table. And it is like a double foreign key table. I write, I need to say this artist wrote that song. It could have been, and again, the relationship is that a song can be written by many artists and an artist can write many songs. It's many-to-many relationship. And I want some kind of a form that allows my user to make these relationships. And right now I'm going to do it one at a time. So I'm going to allow them to choose an artist and a song and establish that relationship. So if they want to say John Lennon wrote All You Need Is Love, then they do that. And if they want to come back and make it a true many-to-many relationship and say Paul McCartney also wrote All You Need Is Love, they're going to have to come back to the form and do it again. It allows them to write one record at a time. And then I'm going to come back and improve on that slightly. It's still going to be crappy looking, but here we go. Okay, but again, the foreign keys are going to be to maintain the database integrity. I want to control what the user can choose for these foreign keys. And so I'm getting them from, my choices come from other database queries. I just can't have the user typing any old crappy thing in. I have to control it so that my database integrity is maintained. So artist choices, I go query the artist table and I'm making a list of artists. And I'm making my choice of lists. My choice of lists is remember our Flask. Choices are a list of tuples, and the tuple is going to have two parts, and the two parts that you use, say in a drop-down list or checkboxes or radio buttons, the two things you use are, one of them is what you show the user and the other one is what you pass behind the scenes to use. So in this example and in the later example, what I'm going to use behind the scenes is an ID. And what I'm going to show the user, in this case for the artist, is the first and last name of my artist. And then I'm going to create a tuple from that and add the tuple to my list. And those are my choices. I'm going to have a handler that says, here's what you just entered. And what I use behind the scenes are just IDs. So my handling page is going to look pretty crappy. It's just going to say song 3, artist 2, and song 3. And not tell you that artist 2 was Paul McCartney, and song 3 was, I don't know, Alice or something, who knows. If I wanted to have a better looking handler page to say that, oh, artist number 2 is Paul McCartney, then I would have to string together more things here. Remember how we were using those vertical bars, and then have to split it on the other side. So I'm not going to do all that, but you know how to do that. You know how to make it look nicer. We were doing that all the time in Flask. That's work you know how to do. So if you want a better looking handler, you know how to handle it. Okay, so I did this for artists. I did this for songs. So when the user's making the choices, they see the names of the artists, they see the names of the songs. When they go over to the handler, it's going to look crappy and it's just going to have numbers. But if you don't want just to have the numbers, then you've got to play the game with the delimiters. Okay. Or do more Python and more querying, and so there are other ways to do it as well. Okay. So that is the form. There is a route that uses that form. So this whole new file is new because previously with the Beatles, I didn't do any Flask. Now I'm doing some Flask. I have a default route. It's going to the written by insert route. Here's my importing my form that we just saw. Here is that route I just made. Here's a little thing I tend to do, and it's just because I don't have good memory. So this URL for, I said written by underscore insert. And then I never know, frankly, whether that should match the other route or match this function name. And so I make them the same. So I don't know, does that match? Is that supposed to match this? Is that supposed to match that? I don't know, make them the same, and then life is easy. Okay, so my default route goes to the written by route. The written by, here's my written by route. I'm bringing in the form that we just talked about. I'm creating a form of the class. So here's me just importing it. Here's me using it. What comes back from the results? The result is the page is going to have 2 drop downs. What I'm going to get from the drop downs are 1 ID each. And I'm going to, let me look at Beatles load. We saw Beatles load work previously. Here's how I'm writing to a write table. Remember, our other tables correspond to classes. And so we have sort of a class and we're using a constructor. This one is a class, it is a table rather than a full-blown sort of class. And this is how I am going to write to it, but I'm only going to write to it sort of one of these at a time. Okay, but it is session, execute, my underscore DB, write table, insert, values, parentheses, square bracket, parentheses. So there's a sequence of things there that is a little bit horrible looking, but you got to get it right. I know because I got it wrong. Parentheses, square bracket, parentheses. So there's in general, it's expecting a list of tuples. And even if there's only one tuple in the list, I still need the square brackets. Okay. So let's go back to routes. Okay. So here I am inserting. So here's my parentheses, square bracket, parenthesis, and then it's 2 numbers. It's the artist ID and the song. All right. And Okay. And then I start at written by insert, go to written by after. That is my handler. Here's my insert. It's just going to be a song drop down, an artist drop down, and a button. So not very nice looking. And the after is just going to be, here is the artist ID, and here's the song ID that you just entered. All right, so that was fun. Did I tell you everything I needed to tell you? Oh yeah, I used the data table layout, even though I'm not doing any data tables. I was thinking about it, but then I didn't. But I did in my layout comment out the navigation, because I didn't need the navigation because that was for planets. Okay. But I didn't take it out entirely. I just commented it out. So that if I want to come along later and add in a navigation, well, there's a navigation for me to sort of see and start working from. Okay. So what do I need down here? I need the Beatles routes. And then to run it, control click. And so here is my list. I have not done any good, careful checking of what records I already have in this table. So if you try to write the record again that you already have, it may crash. We haven't been careful about that. What song do I want? And I Love Her. Okay, And I Love Her, John Lennon, insert written by record. So the artist was 1, John Lennon was 1, and the song ID was 33, and that should now be in my database. Okay, I've shown you a number of times already. Then I have the extension by Alex CVZZ for viewing SQLite. I'm going to say Control Shift P. That wasn't right. I didn't have code highlighted, so it wanted to print. Control Shift P. There's my SQLite thing. I have the Beatles database. That up this, and presumably I've just written to the right table. And 133. That's what I just wrote. So that was song 33, written by John. Okay. So that was a many-to-many insert. The table had multiple foreign keys, so I wrote my foreign keys in drop-down selects, and then to maintain my referential integrity, I think it is, if I remember my database, which I may not. Okay. I want to make it slightly better, and I mean slightly. And I'm going to, it is, after all, a many-to-many relationship. So I could choose many songs. There are many songs of the Beatles written by Lennon and McCartney both. So I'm going to just sort of redo this next, change the selects, the select field to select multiple field. I'm not going to go for full-on checkboxes, but I could. But I'm going to go to this kind of a drop-down where you can choose more than one thing in each. And then you remember that I'm getting a list of things. So I don't have just one ID coming back from my form, but I will have 2 lists. So let's just see how that looks, and then I'll show you the lab and call it a day. Okay, so now I'm doing again the same thing, inserting in a many-to-many relationship in the Beatles database, but I'm going to shift to an element on my HTML form that is more in sync with the fact that I can choose, then it's many-to-many, then I can choose many on each thing here. Okay. And you might, depending on your design, choose only one of them to be many, or maybe you like the original where you just choose one and you choose the other. But I did both. And I just have to try and remember my George Harrison songs and not choose any of them. Okay. So here I'm copying this. So it's all the same files, except I've edited some of them now. 341, SQL2, virtual environment, paste. Okay. And let's delete all these. All right. And what has changed? The forms has changed. Doesn't seem like much has changed. I still have this big querying code to get all the artists and all of the songs. Here's the change. I changed it to a select multiple field. I changed it to a select multiple field, a select multiple field. That was my change over here in the form, but it's important. That's the source of all the change. So it's not much on this form, but it leads to all the other changes. Okay. What is there on the HTML? The insert, there's no change. I want a song. I want an artist. So there was no change here. There was a little change in the form. I changed from select field to select multiple field. There was no change here in the HTML form. The routes, they change. Because the route is where I do the inserting. And now I'm getting not one ID, not one artist ID and one song ID, but I'm getting a set of artists and a set of songs, and I want to insert all those records. So you remember get list from your Flask days, which were not that long ago. So there is result.getList artist ID. That's now because it's a select multiple field. That is now a list, and so is the song. And so I'm looping over the artists and looping over the songs, and then I'm inserting this is just a made up thing for looping. Person ID and thing ID are just made up looping variables, but that's what I'm inserting into. I'm not inserting the whole list. I'm inserting a record at a time with these two iterating variables that I have. And then it's a nested loop. So I'm going through all the artists. For each artist, I'm going through all the songs, and then I'm going to the next artist. And then when I'm all done, and then, so that's the change. That's the big change on the routing page. And then on the after page, the handler page, I'm doing the same nested loop. So I'm showing you I'm looping through all the artists and then showing you all the songs. There's no reason I couldn't flip it and loop through have the songs as my outer loop and the artist as my inner loop. That might make more sense. But I never promise you that I make sense. So let's see that. So those are the changes. I changed from select field to select multiple. In the HTML with the form, there was no change. I still have a place for the songs. I still have a place for the artists. In the route table, that's where I do the actual insert into the database. And so I needed to introduce this get list idea and loop through my artists and my song. So my inserting was inside two nested loops. And then the same thing for my display. I had two nested loops to show all the records that I've inserted. It's not going to look nice. It's not going to say the artist name. It's not going to say the song name. Again, we know how to do that. It's more work. We have to introduce a delimiter and then split on that delimiter. We know how to do it. And then there are other ways to do it with sort of recreating the database and getting, oh, I have the ID, let me get all the information based on that ID. There are other approaches we could take. But all I really wanted to do is to say, yes, I've shown you a many-to-many insert, which I have. Okay. And so here now this is the multiple select, and here's the for the song, here's the multiple select for the artist. And let's do Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, Baby You're a Rich Man, All You Need Is Love, and they're written by Lennon and McCartney. So we're doing 4 songs and 2 artists. I think they're all, yeah, I think they're all Lennon McCartney. I don't think there are any Harris songs in there. Harrison songs in there. Insert. And then I didn't even have any nice breaks in here. I probably should have given you at least a nice break. And then let's look at the right table. So these are these high 190 sort of toward the end of their career as the Beatles, not the end of their careers, but as the Beatles, their end of the career. And let me show the table. And it's these, here's what I just added. 1 is Lennon, and those last 4 songs are credited to Lennon, and 2 is McCartney. They're also credited to McCartney. Okay, so I'm writing to a many-to-many table. So I'm inserting into a many-to-many table. So we've inserted into a table without any foreign keys. We've inserted into a table with 1 foreign key. We've inserted with a table with multiple foreign keys. We've done all the kinds of inserting. We've done querying out the wazoo. We have deleted, though we've only done an easy delete, and I still owe you update. So, and let's just look at what you have to do. I'm basically making you study for the test. Though all my labs are really, could be said that. But this will give you the clearest idea of what the test might be like. So I'm giving you lots of things. I'm giving you a define. And here's the weird little check thread thing there. I gave you a Flask. That's back when I called it Flask. I started calling it routes. So, but this is the routes. This is the load. This is the define. I give you some forms. I give you a database. I give you some templates. You'll have to probably make some more, but there I give you some templates. I give you some data. So I give you a sort of a working database. And then what are you supposed to do with it? Add some more routes. And I'm giving you the definition of a database in the define. This is a simple database with just 2 tables. But there's a lot of stuff here that you could use to answer the other part of the test. Even if if my site crashed and you did no labs until after the test, this second half of the test almost tells you a good part of the answer for the first part of the test. Anyway, all right. So what do we have? I tell you what I'm giving you. I gave you a lot of stuff. It says add a route for a data table. And by a data table, that means the one that uses jQuery that has searching and sorting. Add a route for inserting a country. The country codes were not integer. So the person's going to, so there's no auto increment. So the person's going to have to enter a country code, and you're just going to trust them to not enter one that's already been used. And then add a route that adds a new city. And the city belongs to a country. There's some weirdo example of a city that belongs to 2 countries. I think there's such a thing in the world, and we're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. Okay, so a country has many cities, but a city has 1 country. And there's at least 1 counterexample of that, and I don't care. Okay, but so this is an insert with a foreign key. So you have to query the database, get all the possible countries, and then do that insert. So that's what I asked a year ago. So I asked 2 inserts, one of them more difficult, this one fairly straightforward, this one a little bit more difficult, and a data table. I don't think I asked the same routes the other time. If I ask for an API route, that tends to be pretty easy as a route because you don't have to make up an HTML table for it. So I might ask, if I get an API, I might ask you for 4 routes, but I have to keep it relatively simple. Any questions for the recording? No. Stop recording.